This is Radio Boston. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. Anthony Brooks is in New Hampshire today. For 10 years, Subramanian Swamy taught an economics course at Harvard University's summer school. Swamy earned his own econ Ph.D. from Harvard, and he went on to become a prominent Indian politician in India, leading, as he still does, the country's Janata Party. And for a decade, his political views didn't seem to matter to anyone at Harvard, until this summer, when Swamy wrote a fiery op-ed in an Indian newspaper calling for a particularly Hindu solution to wiping out Islamic terrorism. Annex parts of Bangladesh, he wrote. Prohibit conversion from Hinduism to any other religion. Mandate learning Sanskrit. The op-ed did not sit well with several students who called for his ouster. Harvard President Faust issued a statement supporting Swamy's right to free speech, and the matter seemed settled until last month, when a group of faculty effectively fired Swamy without notifying him by voting to remove his courses from the summer school catalog. Now that has ignited an even larger controversy at Harvard, one that pits extreme expression against academic freedom and raises the question just how broad a universe of ideas should be welcomed at a university. Well, we'll hear from multiple sides today, but first we'll hear from Subramanian Swamy himself. He's currently back in the Indian capital of Delhi, and I spoke with him this morning and started by asking how he reacted to being fired by his Harvard colleagues.
Well, I really love Harvard. I've got a long association with them. They gave me a wonderful education. And then this last summer, when this matter was raised, nobody sent me the petition, but the university president, a spokesman, issued a statement saying, for us, free speech is sacred. And that, again, made me very proud of Harvard. But then this was a really rude shock.
You're quoted in the Boston Globe as saying, "The people who cut me out are leftists who have nothing to do with economics. It's almost like the Spanish Inquisition. They didn't give me a chance." Do you feel that strongly about it?
Well, in fact, I found out the Spanish Inquisition, they did give the other side a chance. Here it's worse than Spanish Inquisition. I might say it's perhaps Hitler's Inquisition or maybe Stalin's Inquisition. It's not Spanish Inquisition.
What's your counter-argument?
I mean, it's unbelievable that they would... if they had just cancelled my course without any comments, there would have been no problem. But they cancelled my course making this case out. Then it's clear that even the most basic minimal democracy in any country would require that the other side, so it's in Latin called audi alteram partem, which means, you don't decide anything behind anybody's back.
Well, what's your particular counter-argument then to what Harvard did? Because on the other hand, you could say that the Harvard faculty went through a process that was very much within its right to vet courses and instructors who are their colleagues.
Yes, you see, that's true, but it's the Department of Economics which should have the decisive voice in that. It was a professional economics course, and this article came in India. I have a dual role, and Harvard knew it all along, that I'm a politician in India, and when I come to America, I do academics. And so you can't expect me to tailor my political role in India according to what Harvard, some professors in the religion department or those leftists in the South Asia department want me to do. I mean, if they want to tell me how Indian politics should be run, they should be living in India.
If we could, I think it would help our listeners if we could talk a little bit about what exactly you did write that caused such a furor and drew so much attention. This was in an op-ed that you wrote in an Indian publication that was published...
Indian newspaper, yeah.
That's right. It was published a short time after terrorist attacks in Mumbai in July of 2011. Now, in the article, in the op-ed, you basically say that Hindus in India must rally against Islamic terrorism, and you lay out a plan on how to do that. And included in that plan, you say, for example, remove 300 mosques that are currently at sites where there are also Hindu temples. Now, some people saw that as an incitement to violence, that removing mosques essentially meant violent removal of them.
First of all, that's a truncated statement. What I said is that if the terrorists come and throw bombs in our temples, then those mosques which are built by demolishing temples in the past, they must be demolished. And furthermore, incitement, there's not a single incident that has taken place. I have in my party Muslims who have not objected. And by truncating my statements, any of what I wrote could be made to look very bad. But if you read the whole thing, I haven't said anything which is different.
Well, sir, I have read the whole thing, and what you state are what you feel are the major goals of Islamic terrorism. You don't say if, you state them as what you believe to be their actual goals. And for example, when it comes to the goal of turning India into an Islamic state, one of your remedies, your prescribed remedies, is denying voting rights to any Indian who denies his or her Hindu heritage, basically disenfranchising any Muslim who will not say that his or her ancestors are Hindu. I wonder if you could further explain
First of all,
that.
when I say you have not read it, I don't mean you in particular. I mean those who are attacking me. As far as this point is concerned, you will see I have said that if the Muslim says that he is descended from Hindus, which is what the genetic studies in India that we have, and including those published abroad, show, then we will accept them as part of our family. So I'm here actually giving a prescription on how the Muslim can feel secure, because we are being attacked by Islamic terrorists. We want to make a distinction between the Muslims who are law-abiding and within the country, and those who are coming from outside in the name of Islam.
But I do wonder, India is a secular democracy. It's the world's largest democracy. It is not technically a Hindu state. So how is disenfranchising potentially 100 million Muslims in concert with the values of the modern Indian state?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that over 95% of the Muslims, through their official leaders or their chosen leaders, have already declared that their ancestors are Hindus. The only problem we have is with these Wahhabi Sunni Muslims who are affected by Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda and so on. And they are able to get local recruits. And so I want to make a distinction, number one. Number two, we are a secular country in the sense that all secular posts have to be given irrespective of somebody's religion. But as the Prime Minister of Britain recently said on 17th of December, England is a Christian country. Your own Harvard itself had a professor by name Samuel Huntington who wrote a book on who we are and said, the United States, as the Supreme Court said in 1931, is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian English-speaking nation.
But neither David Cameron nor Samuel Huntington have suggested that non-Christians be denied voting rights.
I didn't say non-Christians should be denied. I only said those Muslims who do not agree that their ancestors are Hindus. There was a brutal Islamic rule in this country. Hindus were forcibly converted. A lot of atrocities took place. We want to forget all that. And in that context, I was giving a formula by which we could make a distinction between our Muslims and Al-Qaeda Muslims.
Mr. Swamy, do you believe that, in a sense, Harvard did to you, in a small way, what you would do to India's Muslims?
No, I am not doing anything to the Indian Muslims. I'm trying to make them part of my family. And Harvard is kicking me out of their family. There's a vast difference between the two. It has made me very sad. I think Harvard should apologize to me.
Subramanian Swamy, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
Subramanian Swamy spoke with us from the Indian capital of Delhi this morning. So listeners, what do you think? Did what you hear just now sound like hate speech to you? Or did it just sound like the honest, if impassioned, political opinion of a prominent Indian? Should a controversial op-ed be enough to get a college instructor fired? Or is this an affront to free speech? Is it campus political correctness run amok? And the big question again is, how broad a universe of ideas should be welcomed at a university? Give us a call at 1-800-423-8255. That's 800-423-TALK. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and we know there's a lot of social media action around this topic. We're at Radio Boston. Well, joining me now in the studio is Diana Eck. She's a professor of comparative religion and Indian studies at the Harvard Divinity School. She also led the faculty charge to remove Swamy's courses from Harvard's summer school catalog. Welcome back to Radio Boston, Professor Eck.
Thank you very much.
Sitting next to you is Harry Lewis. He's a professor of computer science at Harvard University and former dean of Harvard College. He opposes Harvard faculty's action. Professor Lewis, welcome to Radio Boston.
Thank you.
Professor Eck, let me just start with you. What was your rationale for proposing the amendment that led to Swamy's courses being removed from the catalog?
Well, let me first say, Meghna, that I'm actually a member of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which is why I was able to be at that meeting.
Versus strictly the Divinity School.
My rationale was this. It happened during the summer when we started receiving a lot of petitions from students, from graduate students who are of Indian origin. And I mean, Harvard is very much a global university with students from every part of the world. It's not just a United States university. And they were making demands to look into the case of Professor Swamy because of the article that had been circulated. I did not sign that petition. I suggested that probably the way they ought to deal with it is to go to his classes and stand outside as a kind of Gandhian satyagraha and confront him over this issue. And I said, in general, the university does not respond to petitions in relation to faculty, but it would be a good idea if some of the faculty members actually circulated a letter, which we did. It was signed by 40 senior members of the Harvard faculty to the president and the dean of the summer school, asking that there be a serious review of his appointment, simply because it is a yearly appointment, not something that he's not a regular member of the faculty. So, that was sort of the origin of this. We heard nothing else about it until the night before the December 6th faculty meeting, when suddenly those courses were still there, and it did not seem to any of us that a serious review had been undertaken.
Well, as it's reported in Harvard Magazine, because we weren't, obviously, you were at the faculty meeting,
I was there,
we were
yes.
not, so I don't mean to put any words in your mouth, but in Harvard Magazine, there is a report of what happened at that faculty meeting, and it says that you stood up and effectively said that the problem with this op-ed that Swamy wrote was that it was an incitement to anti-Muslim violence, and that is what made it speech that you didn't feel should be protected at Harvard University. I mean, what exactly made it cross that line?
I mean, there are several things that made it cross that line. First, the move which he makes in his article from talking about, and he made it in his discussion with you just now, from talking about terrorist Muslims, those al-Qaeda-related Wahhabis, etc., to suggesting remedies that would affect every Muslim in India. And that move from particular Muslims to all Muslims is something that we're seeing all too much of in the world today, and indeed we see it in some of the extremist politics in the United States. So that really is the very definition of hate speech, when you're categorizing an entire people and suggesting remedies that would affect those people. And, of course, the issue of the disenfranchisement of minorities who do not proudly claim their Hindu origin, and the prohibition against conversion. Both of those are not simply the opposite side of a heated argument. Those are the infractions of human rights. And it seemed to us there is a real difference between free speech. I would welcome hearing Swamy give a lecture at Harvard. I think that is absolutely within the grounds of free speech, and the United States has very, very generous interpretations of free speech. But the difference between free speech and hiring someone for the way in which they exercise their free speech, to me, is a critical responsibility of the faculty.
Professor Lewis, let me bring you in here. Your response to what Diana Eck has just said?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be here, and it's as in discussing any kind of civil rights issue, I'm in the difficult position, the awkward position of disagreeing with people whom I have a great deal of respect. Professor Eck certainly I'm a great admirer of hers, and simultaneously finding myself allied with people that I probably wouldn't like very much if I got to know them better. But that's the way it is. My view on this is pretty simple. It sort of goes with the quotation from Voltaire. It's not actually by Voltaire, where he says, I despise what you have to say, but I'm going to protect your right to say it. And his everything that Professor X says about the nature of his speech is correct. I'm sure it's despicable, and I certainly don't support any of the things that he has to say.
But is it
but
really
it's political? But it's political speech, and it's political speech that has absolutely nothing to do with the courses he was teaching. And it was written in an op-ed half a world away from the Harvard campus. And I think that the procedure that was used to bar it, or bar the speaker from the Harvard campus, sets a very dangerous precedent, because exactly the same vote gets taken in the springtime about the regular course catalog.
Those courses taught by tenured faculty as well?
Absolutely. And there is procedurally, I'm sure Professor Eck would not do it, but the very next day after this was reported in the Harvard Crimson, there was an op-ed in the Crimson suggesting that the Swamy treatment should be given to Professor Mansfield, because he too had voiced his belief that human rights allegedly should be denied to certain people. So, it sets us on a very dangerous precedent.
So do you really feel that Harvard has now taken the step, the Harvard faculty has taken a step that opens the door to personal political views being part of the consideration when it comes to a person being appropriate as an instructor?
And in a very extra procedural way. This is a completely pro forma vote that everybody sleeps through once a year when it's taken, or twice a year because of the summer school catalog is done on a separate vote. And there, without any advance notice, suddenly we have a motion voted on by 51% of a small minority of the faculty, meaning the quorum is very small. And anybody could be excluded from the catalog. Yes, it certainly opens up that possibility.
Diana, Professor Lewis just quoted Voltaire, and if I may, I'd like to actually quote from the Faculty of Arts and Sciences Free Speech Guidelines. This was issued in 1990, but it was adopted at Harvard University. It said, "Free speech is uniquely important to the university because we are a community committed to reason and rational discourse. We assume that the long-term benefits to our community will outweigh the short-term unpleasant effect of sometimes noxious views. We are committed to maintaining a climate in which reason and speech provide the correct response to a disagreeable idea." Was reason and speech not adequate in this case? And why not?
This is a very difficult thing. I agree totally with what those free speech guidelines suggest. And I also feel that there is a difference between supporting free speech across the university, no matter what is said, and by a matter of sort of almost rote cronyism, continuing to provide a salary to a summer school instructor who has exercised his free speech in this way. We do not criminalize free speech at Harvard, and very often in the United States, it's the very word "skokie" is enough to demonstrate the fact that even a Nazi parade through the most a community in the U.S. that has been most affected by the Holocaust is within the range of freedom of expression. But are we going to hire that? I mean, we're not expected to. And I think this is an exceptional case.
Well, let me ask you about that, Professor Lewis, because suppose we had taken the words Hindu and Muslim and India out of the equation and replaced them with black, white, and the United States. If a similar op-ed had been written in the United States, with a member of the Harvard faculty or an instructor, a non-tenured instructor, I can't imagine that person would be walking around without facing some heavy criticism.
Well, heavy criticism is exactly what,
or even the same action.
Again, you several times in your introduction talked about what kinds of ideas were welcomed at Harvard. These ideas are not welcomed. I certainly wouldn't argue that Harvard should welcome these ideas, but they should be permitted so that they can be treated with the rule of reason and with opposing words. I think it does go back to the economics department to some degree to ask why they thought this person would be an appropriate instructor for us. I feel very uncomfortable reaching so far across departmental boundaries to start judging the qualifications of somebody to teach economics on the basis of the op-eds that they write in foreign newspapers.
Do you think political correctness has gone too far on campus?
I don't want to make a broad statement like that. This case is very peculiar in lots of ways because it is correctly noted that it is a hiring decision as opposed to an invitation to a speaker decision and so on. And I, frankly, in this political controversy of which I know absolutely nothing, I didn't even, unfortunately, have the privilege of hearing the eloquent speakers at the faculty meeting because I had a prior commitment. I was involved in a previous discussion in the sort of faculty council, the faculty senate, so I was familiar with the circumstances, but I didn't hear the persuasive argument. So I don't know which side you would say is left or right or anything in this. Professor Swamy apparently thinks he's on the right, and Professor Eck is on the left. I don't know anything about that. I'm completely neutral on that. The one thing that's plain to me, and I think this is an important point, is that this is not incitement to violence in the sense in which he could be arrested for it in the United States. It's not incitement to violence in the sense of American law. It is political speech. And if there's anything that has to be protected, it's political speech.
We're talking about the case of Subramanian Swamy. He's a Harvard summer school instructor who was essentially fired by his colleagues for a very controversial op-ed. Some see it as an anti-Muslim op-ed he wrote in his native India. We're at 1-800-423-8255. That's 800-423-TALK. If you'll stand by for just a moment, we have several callers I'd like to get to. There's also lots of action on this on social media. Someone named True Nationalist tweets at Radio Boston, Dr. Swamy is forthright. What happened to him can happen to anyone opposing Islamic force. Let's go to Rahim, who's calling from Brighton. You're on the air, Rahim.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'd like to preface my statement by saying I'm an American-born Pakistani Muslim, and knowing what I know about Indian politics and history, what the professor said was extremely dangerous and could provide a lot of harm in his home country. But the way he was sacked and the reasons for being sacked, without looking too much into the content, are extremely dangerous and makes you think about why universities are the way they are nowadays, back with just liberal professors thinking about it.
Rahim, thank you so much for your call. Diana Eck.
This is a very interesting point. I have spent a good bit of my academic life in India, and one of the things that is very clear is that this is dangerous speech in that context. Were it to be acted upon in any way, shape, or form as a platform for how to wipe out Islamic terrorism. The date on which this debate took place in the faculty was December 6th. And another of my colleagues recalled that on December 6th, 1992, exactly something happened that was of the sort that had been advocated here, which is a mosque that had sat on the site of a Hindu temple of old in the ancient city of Ayodhya, still a popular pilgrimage city, was basically reduced to rubble by Hindu nationalists who could be called little better than Hindu thugs.
But on the other hand, let's not forget that Subramanian Swamy published his op-ed a few days after a triple bombing in Mumbai that killed 26 people and injured over 100.
This is exactly the case. So, I mean, you publish a piece after a triple bombing, which Islamic extremists and terrorists are blamed for, and then the remedy that you propose is something that affects all Muslims. I mean, that really is the very definition of hate speech.
We're running down on time, and I just want to take a step back with both of you and explore briefly the effect that this has had on Harvard University. Because when I look at the Hindu-Muslim conflict, the communal conflict in India, I see almost a blood feud that's been going on for generations. It is as intense a conflict as the one we find in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, making the India-Pakistan border, for example, one of the most dangerous places in the world. On the other hand, this is a conflict that the students at Harvard University themselves are going to inherit. It's not going to be solved today or tomorrow. So it makes me wonder if Harvard is a place where we feel like we can't have this conversation that with some very, very hot-blooded political speech. How are we going to teach students the tools of civil discourse they're going to need to solve this problem in the future?
be great to have this conversation with hot-blooded political speech. I'm happy to and open to having that conversation. I do think that when the faculty is called upon to approve a certain amount of summer school courses in which one of these people has been advocating things that are so very, very dangerous, we are not called upon to hire him.
Professor Lewis, your thoughts?
Dangerous speech is permitted on the Harvard campus.
And finally, on the Harvard Magazine website, and amongst others, there are many comments about this story. And there's one I wanted to read to you briefly. It's from someone who simply calls themselves Concerned. And Concerned writes, "I find it ironic that Harvard sees nothing wrong in accepting endowments from the Saudi royal family, especially when in Saudi Arabia the persecution of religious minorities and women is sanctioned by law, whereas they found it unacceptable for Mr. Swamy to publish his comments in an Indian newspaper." And I believe Concerned is referring to an endowment of $20 million made by Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see a parallel there, that why is speech unacceptable whereas money is not?
It's not a question of money and speech. In that case, it's a question of being able to make some sort of discernment between particular Muslims and their endowments and all of Saudi Arabia and all of Islam. And I think the thing that's most dangerous about this case is that it does have big resonances internationally, including in the United States, where there are many people who are upset about it precisely because they share that view that Muslims in general are part of a global jihad and that we're issuing a fatwa and, all sorts of things that, to me, are outside the legitimate realm of sort of rational discourse.
Professor Lewis, last thought goes to you. I mean, we didn't actually get too deeply into the fact that Mr. Swamy was an instructor. He's not tenured faculty at Harvard. Do you think that this decision may have a chilling effect on instructors and possibly even tenured faculty?
Well, I don't. I think it's less likely to have a chilling effect on tenured faculty, but there are a lot of non-tenured faculty who are hoping for longer careers. I don't know what its effect is going to be. All I know is that the way it was done certainly creates the opportunity for exclusion of anybody from the course catalog on the basis of their political speech.
Harry Lewis is a professor of computer science at Harvard University and a former dean of Harvard College. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Diana Eck, professor of comparative religion and Indian studies at the Harvard Divinity School and also a member of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard. Professor Eck, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And listeners, please do continue this conversation. We're looking forward to your comments at radioboston.org. Stay with us because up next, sports with Bill Littlefield. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty with Anthony Brooks. This is Radio Boston.